Hertfordshire is generally a safe place to live, given national statistics. There's certainly no detrimental impact. And I mentioned about the clarity of visibility in terms of criminality, but also, yes, we have had positive feedback from the police in terms of visibility of if they're chasing someone in a vehicle, the colour of that vehicle. So very simple things like that has been a positive out of the scheme, and that's one of the main distinctions between conventional orange and white light. It's only when you get on site that you actually recognise that clarity of vision, which not just the colour but the whole look and feel of actually when you're actually on the ground. So positive feedback from the police.
Thank you.
Alternative energy sources. There's already some examples out there. We've got some remote signs in some villages where you've got some solar panels that look like they've probably dropped out of the sky. I don't think the technology is quite there yet in a form that can give you the economies of scale as well as the aesthetics, etc. But certainly the public sector always keeps, and certainly Hertfordshire keeps an eye on the future. We're with this LED technology at the moment in the CMS. The pace of technology is still changing, so it's about keeping an eye on the future, when to invest, when not to invest. So need to be flight of foot. A few years ago it was part night lighting. You need to move on, so you need to have some flexibility built into your strategy. So I wouldn't say that we discount it. We did look at it at that time. I don't think it was viable, but we'll have to see what the future holds for us on that.
Good.
Question to Mark. A fantastic project, absolutely so impressive. Just thinking about the explosive operation, which only had a 15-minute window, and having seen explosives on high-rise flats that sometimes don't always go to plan. Were there any contingencies made if it was a partial demolition for that situation?
As part of the process, it was about 6 months from the idea to the pressing of the button. So in that process, the risk, we looked at the contingency. So one of the big concerns was, will the columns blow up? Will the deck come down? And we'll be left with this horrendous-looking half-finished bridge. The explosives contractor who was on board sort of gave the guarantee that by putting twice the amount actually needed in the columns would be a good contingency plan. And it was great in a sense. Why go fine? It was why put 70 in when you can put 150 kilograms of explosive in? The biggest worry was actually the no detonation, having a missed detonation. So you have two separate cords going down. So if one fails, you can press the other. And funny, the biggest problem one would get, especially in the countryside, would be rabbits and rats gnawing through the detonation cables. So again, they were all suspended and ducted and sealed. And then you have someone standing actually at the bridge. Once that's all charged up, you've then got 24/7 security on the structure. The contingency in place, we worked out with the timings that we had 2 opportunities to do the rolling block, to start it, stop it, and then have to roll back to the beginning and recommence. Didn't really want to do it because there was about sort of 10 to 15 different call signs that were required to actually get everyone in the right place at markers on the different roads, so they all set off at the same speed at the right time, so the traffic was stopped at a certain point because we wanted to minimise the queuing traffic on the motorways. But the contingencies were there in case something would happen. And in all, we also booked the following weekends as well as a closure, just in case the weather or anything else occurred. So there was even down to the line of what happens if the last car going through the junction breaks down halfway along. So you have recovery crews sitting in standby just outside the blast radius to dive in and hook up the car and drag it out as quickly as possible.
Okay, please.
Did you look at whole life costing in there? Did you look at whole life costing in the scheme, such that and could you tell us any sort of high or low maintenance examples within the project?
One of the big areas that was looked at was the drainage because of the new system. It needed to be incredibly deep. I vaguely touched on it there, but that was quite a big issue we looked at. The maintainer, who were A1 Plus at the time, were working alongside us during the preliminary design. So they were very keen to looking at, we didn't want that long-term cost of having to have complicated pumping systems. But then that brought in the issue of the health and safety of working in deep excavations. But with the time in the ECI, one of the key areas was making sure that we had a gravity-fed main, and we came up with construction methodology that was safe and robustly installed. So that was one of the key areas on it.
Peter and Mark, you both spoke really eloquently about the benefits that came out of sort of quite different projects. Sort of question for you both and for Andreas. Do you think we do enough to get that good news out to a wider audience?
I'll start. I don't think we do. I think in the last presentation, good example of modern technology and different generations in terms of what do they tune in to get their information. So more to be done. And I would say that be open-minded about the range of media. And certainly that's being applied more and more. And think about this, not just the primary benefits, but secondary benefits, the links to health and so on. So if we can make that connection, that adds value and the understanding of public in terms of not just the value for money, but the wider benefits for society in general, and how does that make a difference to their lives on a daily basis. And there's some gems in all projects. It's just picking them out and picking out the bits that actually mean something to people in non-jargon that they can understand that relates to their day-to-day lives.
I agree. I think we tend to get very secularised and have very niche areas where we do great things, but it only ever stays as a great thing either on that project or in that little area of the industry. I think how that is all brought together is the challenge for a lot of the groups, from the ICE to good selves, is that we've got to get that out, got to shout about it, and it's finding that platform where everyone can hear it. Because otherwise it does get, you sort of get a bit frustrating at times where you sort of finish a project, you go off and you look back and you think you've gone back 2 years because you're still doing the stuff previously, and there's small steps forward. And we should really be at this stage having them fantastic lessons learned, and that becomes the norm. It shouldn't be an exemplar, a betterment, and everyone cheers themselves and pats on the back, well done. That should now be the baseline for the next scheme. And how that is tied in is the difficult bit. I think people have been challenging themselves about that for the last 2 decades. But we really should be, with modern information, with the likes of building information modelling coming along, how the lessons learned of those systems can be easily transferred to the next scheme.
Can I just emphasize that I agree with Mark and Peter. We are not doing anywhere near enough to really tell people of our achievements, and no other example illustrates that better to me than the Millennium Footbridge that was built across the Thames in London, which I remember it to this day. When it was first built, everybody was talking about what a beautiful structure it was, and it was always referred to as the Norman Foster footbridge. It was the architect who had built that footbridge. And then there was a small problem with it. I don't know if you remember it, the wobbly bridge. It became the wobbly bridge, and suddenly it wasn't the Norman Foster footbridge. It was the O'Vara footbridge. So, you know, we let ourselves down. It's probably part of our makeup, which is why we have to make so much more of an effort to stamp our foot on the ground and tell people about what we do so that they can understand it and applaud it.
Just I think there's something to support on that, because I think traditionally, looking back when I first started the industry, we never really liked to invite people in. And I remember that as a very young engineer. You didn't go out and shout, and even on some of the bigger schemes, the press and people were just kept a little bit away. You're not an engineer, you don't know what. And it was good on this job to suddenly invite people in. And they weren't just complaining, which everyone assumed it would be. We had some cracking ideas came from the members of the public. I think one of the key ones as well was a good bit of promotion was Highways England actually allowed the BBC to do a documentary on the M6 and brought the BBC in, and they gave them pretty much access all areas, which thrilled me at the start of the scheme when we were trying to set it up. But again, as publicity goes, suddenly millions of people on primetime TV are seeing the excellent work that civil engineers do. So I think to promote that, to shout out about the fantastic achievements that we do for society, we've got to open ourselves up a bit more. We've got to take that risk and invite people in. So, yeah, we do a lot of good stuff. We don't shout about it, but I think we need to change our behaviours and invite more people in and be proactive without shouting about it.
Thank you very much.